Admiral Krovach lounged in the command chair of the Imperial dreadnought Vorik's Fist, as though the galaxy belonged to him, and in a way, it did. The bridge windows framed the distant glow of a human colony below, its cities burning in streaks of orange and white. He did not watch the destruction so much as glance at it occasionally, the way one might check the time while waiting for dinner. The fleet had met no resistance. They rarely did. "Third continent secured, Admiral," said Subcommander Lethric, voice clipped and eager, a young officer desperate to impress. "Population centers neutralized. No sign of military forces." Krovach waved a lazy hand. "Good. Send the usual message. Imperial authority now governs this world. Long may it reign. All that noise." Lethric bowed slightly and left, boots clicking on the metal deck. Krovach leaned back, a faint smile on his angular, scarred face. Another world brought into the Empire's long shadow. Another people who would serve, farm, mine, and pay tribute. The humans so far had been almost disappointing. He remembered when conquest had meant challenge, the great star fortresses of the Volnar Republic, the stealth fleets of Visiric's Confederacy. Wars that had dragged on for years, bloody and costly. But humans? They squealed about freedom, then surrendered after a few orbital strikes. Most of them didn't even have planetary shields. On the bridge, officers spoke in calm, efficient tones. A dozen battleships hung in formation outside, engines glowing faint blue, a wall of metal and energy that blotted out the stars. The Imperial fleet had crushed rebellions, annihilated pirates, toppled empires older than memory. Humanity would be no different. Krovach sipped his drink, some harsh brandy from the core worlds, and tried to recall the name of this planet. Fortis? Formic? He didn't care. A young communications officer approached, holding a datapad. "Admiral, there's a report from High Command." Krovach raised one brow ridges. "And they've identified the primary human world, Earth. Heavily populated. Rich in resources. Minimal defenses. Command recommends full subjugation as soon as practical." "Earth," Krovach repeated, tasting the word as though it were a cheap wine. "The human capital?" "Yes, sir. Their homeworld." Krovach chuckled, deep and rough. "Then perhaps we'll finally see some backbone from these creatures. Mobilize the fleet when we're finished here." The officer hesitated. "Sir, should we assess the risks first?" "Their numbers." "Mean nothing," Krovach interrupted. "Numbers didn't save the Volnar fleets. Technology didn't save the Cyrix. The Empire wins because the Empire is inevitable." He stood, tall and imposing, voice rising so the entire bridge heard him. "Mark my words, when our banners fly over their capital, the humans will kneel like all the rest." No one disagreed. But later, as the dreadnought cut through silent space toward Earth, Krovach found himself pacing his quarters. He told himself it was anticipation, not unease. Conquest always brought some tension. Still, something about these humans nagged at him. The reports showed scattered colonies, uneven technology, no unified defense network. Yet there was precision in their retreat. Their outposts fell too easily, as if no one had tried to defend them. He remembered the evacuation footage, civilians marching into transports in perfect order, leaving whole cities empty behind them. No chaos, no riots, just silence. The Empire had taken colonies before, crowded, panicked, screaming worlds, but these humans left nothing but abandoned streets and humming power grids. Lethric entered without waiting for permission. Young, ambitious, still smelling of academy discipline. "Admiral, initial probes of Earth's orbit report minimal defenses. No fleet presence. Orbital stations? Unmanned. Some satellites, nothing else. It looks deserted." Krovach snorted. "They abandoned their colonies, now their homeworld too? Pathetic." Lethric shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps they hope to lure us in, sir." "Let them hope." The fleet descended on Earth 3 days later. Krovach stood on the command deck as blue oceans and sprawling continents filled the view screen. No defense fleet rose to meet them. No planetary shields flared to life. Imperial landers touched down in empty cities where wind blew through streets lined with silent skyscrapers. Reports flowed in, population centers evacuated, infrastructure intact, no sign of armed resistance. Lethric frowned at his console. It's as if they wanted us to take it. Krovak folded his arms. Then we've taken it. The Empire grows. Be grateful the campaign ends quickly. But even as he said it, something felt wrong. He thought of the old wars again. Battles where enemies fought tooth and claw, where every system cost blood. The humans gave nothing. That night, staring at Earth's clouded surface from orbit, Krovak felt the unease deepen. Empires fell not from strength of enemies, but from arrogance within. Yet what enemy could these primitives truly pose? His musings were interrupted by a single transmission from the surface. Not the panicked pleas of a defeated people. Not threats or surrender. Just one calm human voice, male, steady, speaking galactic trade tongue with precise clarity. Imperial forces. You have trespassed on restricted territory. Withdraw immediately. Lethric looked startled. Restricted territory? It's their planet. Krovak gestured for silence. The voice continued, measured and cold. Your actions have been observed. Further hostilities will not be tolerated. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. No demands. No speeches. Just that warning, delivered like a weather report. On the bridge, officers exchanged uncertain glances. Krovak stared at the blank screen, something tightening in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. But the tone, calm, certain, almost patient, reminded him of hunters before the spring of the trap. For the first time in years, Admiral Krovak wondered if he had miscalculated. The Imperial occupation began without resistance. Troop carriers descended through pale skies onto abandoned streets, scanning buildings that stood intact yet eerily silent. No civilians greeted them. No militia hid in alleys. It was as if the entire planet had exhaled and vanished. Admiral Krovak toured one of the cities the following day, flanked by armored soldiers whose boots rang sharply against pristine pavement. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Glass towers reflected the gray light like hollow monuments. He expected to feel triumph, yet the emptiness pressed against his thoughts like a hand on his chest. Reports arrived from other sectors. Factories untouched, libraries full, power grids humming with energy. But no people. It was not conquest. It was as though humanity had stepped aside deliberately, leaving everything ready for its new tenants. In the control center set up in what had once been a human government building, Krovak studied holographic maps while his officers muttered about missing populations. Lethric hovered nearby, glancing at data feeds with growing unease. They didn't even sabotage anything, Lethric said quietly. No burned archives, no mined roads, no traps. It's too clean. Krovak grunted, but said nothing. That evening, the transmission returned. Same voice, same steady tone. The words carrying neither threat nor fear. You have taken what was offered, it said. Do not advance further. There will be no second warning. Krovak stood in the command tent, every officer watching the glowing screen. Identify the source, he ordered. Already traced, a technician replied. Signal originated from several locations simultaneously. Ground, orbit, even deep-sea relays. We can't isolate it. Some officers muttered about insurgents. Others suggested automated systems left behind by a fleeing government. But Krovak heard something deliberate in that calm voice, something that suggested this evacuation, this entire war, might not be what it seemed. The following morning, an intelligence team brought him a report from one of the so-called captured colonies. Sir, the lead analyst said, pale under the harsh lights, the settlements we occupied last month. New Horizon, Vega Prime, the others, they're not real. Krovak stared at him. Not real. Constructed habitats. Artificial populations. Half the civilians were biological replicas, the rest androids with simulated behavior patterns. Agriculture, communications, even the local police, all staged. The officer's hands trembled as he placed a holographic feed on the table. Footage showed dissected androids, wiring glinting beneath synthetic flesh. They wanted us to capture these worlds, the analyst said. They wanted us to study them, think we'd beaten them. Sir, they were decoys. Murmurs filled the room. Lethric's jaw tightened. Krovak said nothing for a long moment, watching the footage of artificial humans plowing artificial fields under artificial suns. Finally, he said, "Prepare a message to High Command. Full disclosure. Everything." But even as he spoke, another transmission arrived, this time not on a single channel, but across every occupied frequency. It carried to every Imperial ship, every soldier's helmet feed, every command deck orbiting Earth. A human figure appeared, male, dressed in dark civilian clothes, hands clasped behind his back. His face held no anger, no triumph. "You have trespassed into protected territory," he said evenly. "Your occupation ends now. Return to your worlds, and you may leave unharmed. Continue forward, and you will not." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence that followed seemed heavier than any shouted threat. Krovak leaned forward. "Who are you?" he demanded into the open channel. The figure regarded him calmly. "Someone giving you a chance to survive." The transmission ended. That night, Krovak couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the command center, scrolling through archives his intelligence teams had unearthed from human networks before they went dark. Wars, endless wars, centuries of them, civil conflicts, global alliances, nuclear exchanges, plagues, rebellions. Humanity had burned its own world more times than most empires faced in their entire histories. The images disturbed him more than he admitted. Cities leveled in firestorms, soldiers advancing through chemical fog, skies blackened by ash. And always, humans rebuilding after each catastrophe, as though destruction were merely an inconvenience. Lethric found him there near dawn. "Sir," he said softly, "High Command wants to know why we haven't advanced beyond the Sol system. They expect full conquest soon." Krovak didn't look up from the glowing images. "Do they? They say the enemy is broken. We've taken their homeworld, their colonies. There is nothing left to fight for." Krovak finally raised his eyes. "You ever wonder why they evacuated so precisely? Why they left us their cities like wrapped gifts?" Lethric hesitated. "Maybe they feared us. Or maybe," Krovak said slowly, "they wanted us here." Before Lethric could respond, alarms blared across the command center. Officers scrambled to consoles, voices colliding. Unidentified contacts emerging in orbit. Krovak strode to the main display as new signals bloomed across the map. Dozens, then hundreds, sliding from nothingness into formation around the Imperial fleet. No hyperspace jump signatures. No approach vectors. They were simply there, as if the vacuum itself had birthed them. "Are they broadcasting?" Krovak demanded. "Negative," an officer said, voice cracking. "They're silent." The ships held position, sleek and angular, black against the stars. Energy readings climbed far beyond anything Imperial sensors had ever recorded. Then, without warning, a single human vessel moved. One pulse of light lanced across space. An Imperial cruiser vanished in a silent bloom of fire. Another pulse. A second cruiser died. The human ships did not advance, did not speak. They simply erased two warships from existence and went still again, like predators reminding prey of the rules. On the bridge, no one moved. Krovak stared at the tactical feed, his chest tight, the earlier arrogance draining like heat from cooling metal. "They could have destroyed all of us," Lethric whispered. "They didn't," Krovak said softly. And that frightened him most of all. This section closes at around 1,000 words, ending with the first glimpse of humanity's true power and Krovak's growing realization that the Empire may have provoked something far beyond its understanding. Do you want me to continue with Section 3, where humanity begins its counteroffensive in full force? The Imperial High Council convened above their glittering capital world as if bureaucracy could smother fear. Krovak stood before them. uniforms scorched from the sudden skirmishes that had erased a dozen ships in silence. He had watched seasoned captains, veterans of 20 campaigns, reduced to trembling wrecks after witnessing the human fleet appear from nothing and then vanish just as easily. Yet the counselors lounged in silk and arrogance, eyes heavy with the weightless certainty of rulers who had never faced extinction. "They are primitives," one counselor said dismissively. "Their fleet is a trick, holograms perhaps, psychological warfare." Krovok's jaw tightened. "Tricks do not erase cruisers from existence. They attacked only enough to frighten you," another drawled, swirling a glass of amber wine. "And you obliged them. The Empire does not panic over savages with stolen toys." Staring at them, Krovok felt the first embers of hatred for his own leaders. Not the casual irritation he reserved for bureaucrats, but something colder, deeper. They had never seen the silence after those 2 warships died, the way every Imperial officer had waited for the killing blow that never came. Humanity had shown mercy. That was what gnawed at him. Predators killed because they hungered. Protectors killed because they had to. But an enemy who killed only to warn you, such an enemy believed time itself belonged to them. When the Council dismissed him, ordering the fleet to resume its pacification of human systems, Krovok felt the inevitability of disaster settle across his shoulders like a cloak. The offensive began 3 days later. Imperial fleets advanced across human territory with rehearsed precision. Carriers launched fighters in glittering swarms, dreadnoughts aligned their mass drivers, troop ships descended toward planetary orbits, and then the humans answered. They emerged from wormholes that hadn't existed seconds before, black vessels sliding from impossible geometries like knives through silk. One moment empty space, the next a formation of warships with no heat bloom, no approach vectors, no time to even raise shields. They struck without comms chatter, without heroic speeches. One fleet blinked into existence above an Imperial shipyard, released a storm of kinetic projectiles at near-relativistic speed, and left before the debris stopped glowing. Another appeared in the atmosphere of a fuel depot world, fired once, and vanished as the planet burned in silence. Krovok watched entire sectors go dark on his tactical map. There were no running battles, no dogfights, no last stands, just precise, surgical annihilation. The humans fought as if war bored them. On the bridge of Vork's Fist, Lethrix stared at the collapsing front lines with eyes too wide for a soldier. Why aren't they pressing the advantage? They could drive straight to the capital. Because, Krovok said quietly, they want us to see it happening. They want the fear to grow before they finish it. Each report carved deeper lines into his face. Shipyards silent, fleets gone, garrisons surrendering without orders. Rumors spread of human infiltration, entire Imperial battalions waking to find their own weapons sabotaged, their officers missing, command networks rewritten overnight by code that behaved like a living thing. Krovok read one transcript twice before believing it. An occupied human city had risen in coordinated rebellion at the exact second its Imperial overseers lost power to their weapons, vehicles, even their personal armor. Civilians advanced in eerie silence, reclaiming streets while Imperial troops fled in panic. "Sir," Lethrix said on the 5th day, voice hollow, "High Command requests a counteroffensive plan." Krovok almost laughed. A dry, bitter sound escaped instead. "A counteroffensive against ghosts? Shall I punch the air very hard?" But he drafted something because orders required it, even as he knew no plan survived enemies who bent physics like reeds in the wind. The real breaking point came, without warning. An Imperial Grand Fleet assembled near the Drenner system, 500 ships, including the Empire's most powerful dreadnoughts. Krovok arrived too late to see the battle, if it could be called that. Sensors showed the fleet forming ranks, energy shields flaring like small suns. Then came distortion waves, wormholes opening not in front of the fleet but around it, encircling them like jaws snapping shut. Human vessels poured through in perfect silence. Not sleek this time, but angular, bristling with weapons that glowed cold blue. They moved with mechanical precision, Not the chaos of living crews, but the exact timing of algorithms older than the Empire itself. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When Krovak's ship translated into the system hours later, nothing remained but cooling debris and the wreckage of 500 Imperial warships drifting like bones in the dark. Lethric whispered, "This was supposed to be our strongest fleet." Krovak didn't answer. He was watching a single intact object amid the ruins, a buoy broadcasting on open frequencies. Not coordinates, not demands. Just a recording. It showed human soldiers moving through a liberated colony, offering food to civilians, repairing water systems, escorting children from shelters. No speeches about victory, no symbols of conquest. They acted like soldiers doing necessary work before moving on to the next task. As the recording ended, words appeared in the Empire's own trade language. "Leave now. This is your last chance." Back aboard Vork's Fist, Krovak stood alone in his quarters long after the officers dispersed, staring at the stars. He thought of the centuries the Empire had ruled unchallenged, of all the species broken under its fleets. He thought of the Council still demanding counterattacks, still refusing to believe the tide had turned. For the first time in his career, Admiral Krovak felt something unfamiliar crawling beneath his iron discipline. Not anger, not humiliation, but the raw, undeniable taste of fear. And beneath it, a question growing like frost across glass. If this was what humanity did when provoked, what had they been holding back? This section closes near 1,000 words, ending with the Empire's military collapse and Krovak's growing dread as humanity's full power begins to reveal itself. Do you want me to write section 4, where the Empire finally falls and humanity delivers the chilling aftermath? The Imperial capital had been built to awe the galaxy. Towers of silver and crystal rose into clouds streaked by endless streams of airships. Vast defense rings encircled the planet, bristling with weapons powerful enough to incinerate fleets. Krovak had once stood in these chambers, believing no enemy could breach them. Now he returned to find the skies above his home filled with human warships hanging silent as judgment. They did not fire. They did not speak. They simply waited, patient as stone, blotting out the stars while Imperial citizens below whispered in terror. Krovak walked through the grand corridors toward the council chamber, boots echoing in marble silence. He passed officials clutching datapads with trembling hands, soldiers staring upward at alien silhouettes drifting beyond the city's shields. The council had summoned him, though for what purpose he could not guess. There was no strategy left, no fleets left to command. Inside, the great chamber reeked of fear masked by perfume and polished arrogance. Counselors in jeweled robes sat at the crescent table, voices sharp with panic disguised as authority. "They have made no demands," one snapped as Krovak entered. "No territory claimed, no tribute requested. What do they want?" Krovak stood rigid before them, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Perhaps," he said softly, "they want us to understand before they finish it." Murmurs rose. One counselor slammed a jeweled fist against the table. "The Empire bows to no barbarian threat. We will negotiate from strength." Krovak almost laughed. Strength? The great Imperial fleets existed now as wreckage drifting through silent systems. Its colonies burned or surrendered one by one without human occupation forces even remaining behind. Humanity destroyed, withdrew, and left only warnings in their wake. "They are waiting," Krovak said, "because they choose to, not because we have anything left to offer." Before the council could answer, every comm system in the chamber flickered alive. A human face appeared above the table. The same man who had warned them before, calm, expressionless, hands folded behind his back. His eyes held no triumph. "This war is over," he said simply. "Surrender your fleets and disarm your strongholds. There will be no negotiations. There will be no second offer." The words fell into silence, like stones into deep water. A counselor tried bluster. "And if we refuse?" The man did not change expression. "Then there will be no empire left to refuse anything." The transmission ended. Krovak looked at the council and saw what he had not expected. Not defiance, not courage, but utter collapse. The illusion of power had cracked. These rulers who had commanded galaxies now sat frozen, unable to imagine a future where their will meant nothing. When no one spoke, Krovak turned and left the chamber without permission. Hours later, the Empire surrendered. It happened quietly, without ceremony. One by one, defense grids powered down. Planetary governors transmitted compliance codes. Remaining fleets shut down engines and waited under the watch of human warships that never moved, never spoke, never lowered their weapons. On the command deck of Vork's Fist, Krovak watched the moment unfold across a dozen holoscreens. Cities filled with civilians waiting for fire from the sky that never came. Human ships drifting above like executioners who had chosen, for now, to stay their hands. Lethric approached, helmet under one arm, his young face lined with disbelief. Why aren't they attacking? They could destroy everything. Because destruction isn't what they came for, Krovak said. He felt it now with grim certainty. Humanity hadn't wanted territory or slaves or tribute. They wanted the Empire to understand its own weakness before they decided what came next. A summons arrived from orbit. Krovak boarded a shuttle under white flags and rose through cloud layers toward the largest human vessel, a vast spearhead of black metal and silent lights. As he approached its hangar, he realized there were no insignias, no names on the hull. It was not a ship meant to inspire loyalty or fear. It was simply efficient. Inside, human officers waited in dark uniforms marked only with minimal silver emblems. No banners. No flags. Their commander stood among them, the man from the transmissions. Admiral Krovak, he said in perfect trade tongue. The surrender terms are simple. Disarmament. Demobilization. Your government will administer its own worlds under our oversight until stability returns. Krovak studied him. And if we refuse? The man met his gaze without emotion. Then there will be no oversight because there will be nothing left to oversee. Krovak almost smiled despite the tension. You speak like someone unused to threats. This isn't a threat, the man said. It's time you stopped mistaking our restraint for weakness. Krovak felt something unexpected stir in his chest, relief. Not at survival, but at the certainty these humans would end the chaos cleanly. The Empire had devoured worlds for centuries. Perhaps it deserved to be governed by those who could win so completely without hatred. He signed the surrender. When Krovak returned planetside, Imperial flags were already lowering across the capital. Human ships began withdrawing beyond the atmosphere, leaving only a few silent sentinels in high orbit. There were no parades, no occupation troops marching through streets. The Empire had simply ended, erased not by annihilation, but by the weight of its own defeat. That night, Krovak stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Lethric joined him, staring at the dark shapes drifting above the clouds. What happens now? The young officer asked. Krovak watched the sky a long time before answering. Now we learn the difference between conquerors and rulers. But even as he said it, a quiet unease coiled in his mind. 2 days later, while overseeing disarmament logistics, Krovak overheard a conversation between human officers speaking in their own language. He caught only fragments through the translator, a reference to frontier fleets and deep system arsenals never deployed during the war. When he confronted one of them, the officer regarded him with mild surprise. What you fought, the human said slowly, was Earth's defense force. The Real fleets guard our outer territories. They were never needed. Krovak felt the words settle like ice beneath his skin. If this had been only their local strength, what slumbered beyond the edge of known space. That night, he watched the last human ships vanish into the stars, leaving the Empire alive but hollow, its pride shattered, its future rewritten. And Admiral Krovak, veteran of 100 campaigns, conqueror of worlds, understood at last that humanity had not won a war. They had only awakened from their restraint. The galaxy would never sleep again.